So I just want to tell you what was the initial idea of this, because this is like not a commercial thing. It's just more like a little passion project. So the source of like the reasoning for the podcast for me was kind of the gap between understanding an architecture among architects and among citizens, basically.
Right. Okay.
And that's something that just fascinated me all the time, like since the architectural school, because it's almost like we're brewing in like two different informational kind of tanks, people and architects, and we kind of or like supposed to design for the people, for the city, but in many cases we have to explain people why this design is good and like why things are beautiful and how it is connected to like our life and our past and our future. So I kind of wanted it to be one of this like a little bridges into from like the world of architects to the world of citizens and like vice versa. Yeah. So and I started in Moscow, and thank you so much for agreeing to be my first international speaker. And I think it's
a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's so it's a powerful start, I think.
I think that's a great topic, because I think I'm always thinking as well, like especially when you graduate, the like the Zahas, the Frank Gehry's, and all that kind of stuff. Like it's so far removed from
detached,
how people understand. And it was like the typical picture of an architect was like all black backgrounds, like super serious, like pose like that, and there was like no one ever smiling or laughing or anything like that. And I think like Bjarke was one of the first like famous architects at the time where he was actually smiling.
Like, it's a little bit like, you're right, like the previous attitude was a little bit like me against the world, like kind of like I'm like a philosopher, I'm at some kind of I'm far away from you, and if you want to understand like why I'm doing this, you'll have to kind of like dig and do all the like work and just get there. And sometimes I think even if people try to, it's the path of each architect is so unique that the product is basically a very kind of individual, very I don't know, like connected to like to his own path, his own or her own understanding of reality. And with Bjarke and like people like Heatherwick, I think they already grew up among these very serious people, like all dressed in black or like dressed maybe crazy, and they probably were like this new generation of kind of not only great designers but communicators who wanted to maybe break this wall a little bit more and just make it more understandable, more approachable. And kind of Bjarke is almost like this, like a humane version of like ideas of OMA, like in roughly speaking, right?
It was like more interjecting the fun. And I think that's where the diagram thing came from. Like architecture was, when I went to university, it was like so hyper intellectualized. Like, there's this deep philosophy behind the buildings. And I was like, it would just be cool if everyone had a nice little balcony and like these things that people actually want. And then I think the diagrams that Big were well known for at the beginning was a great example of that, of like, how do you just tell the story really simply to anyone through this simple, sequence of 5, 6, 7 diagrams. And I think that's what I'm still really interested in, is like, how do you connect architecture to the real world? And we're not in this like bubble of architecture, which I'm sure we'll get onto later, of like, getting out of that bubble into the real world.
Yeah, with the diagrams, I think despite different attitude of like older architects, younger architects to Bjarke, and like usually I think younger people love him much more, and older kind of more skeptical. The diagrams is something that's everybody implemented. Like I saw people being cranky, being like kind of snobbish about diagrams, like back in like 2010 and maybe a little bit earlier, and then like I see all the same people using this diagram like 5 years later. So it's kind of just became like universal tool. And it's cool thing about it. So Olly, I just will do like a quick introduction, and thank you so much again for joining this conversation. In Russian, this podcast is called Conversations about Architecture. I'll see how I will put the name finally, like the final name for English, but that's how it goes. So Olly Thomas is a great person. The person I met, I think, 4 years ago when Oliver joined our New York office at Big, where I worked at that time, joined as a BIM specialist, computational specialist, and a designer at the same time in architecture, and worked with. I had the pleasure to work with Oliver on maybe 2 or 3 different projects before I moved on, and it was a great experience. And that's something we will be kind of unfolding, unwrapping the skill set and the interest of Olly in this podcast. But the complexity and the future thinking was incredible, and that's why you were one of the first people I thought about when I thought who could be this like a kickstarting person in the English speaking world for me to talk to. So it's kind of friendly, approachable, and really like cutting edge and challenging for me as well, because you know your domain, I think, better than anybody else I've met. So you just moved to London. Can you tell like about what's your new role going to be? Is it going to be the same as like a more already you're going to manage the entire kind of computational world in the London big office?
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, thanks for having me. You've got an Englishman in England speaking English as your first English. So you nailed it. Yeah, no. So I've just moved to London. So I'm taking a few weeks in between. I'm going to go to Portugal and
that's perfect.
Do a bit of relaxation, but also a bit of work. But yeah, I start in London in a few weeks. And I'll be the design technology manager of the office. And essentially, you know, as you said, a great way, the way you explain my role, it's sometimes difficult because I did start as a BIM specialist, was my title when I started at Big. But when Jan hired me, for those of you who don't know, Jan is the BIM manager at Big in New York. And
yeah,
he hired me.
Great guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And, you know, he hired me as a BIM specialist, but he was kind of like, you also have the computational side. And so, you know, there's room to grow. And you know how it is at Big, it's kind of free to, you know, carve your own path, so to speak. A few years ago, when I was renewing my visa, I could change my title. And so that's when I became a design technology specialist. And that's purely, for me, design technology is an umbrella term that encompasses, you know, BIM, computation, augmented reality, virtual reality, all of these topics, right, that you hear all the time. And we're also in this world of specialists right now. Like there's BIM specialists, there's computational BIM specialists, there's like generative design specialists, there's all these different like types of specialists, and each firm calls them something different. So like everyone's just kind of trying to find a way to like describe these things.
The first year I met you, like after I knew you a little bit better, and you showed me some of your previous projects and like what you're working on, like personally, like your like think tank project and developments. I realized that this title of like a manager specialist, it's just like it doesn't cover all your interests, because your interests so broad. And right now you have your own, let's call it like a think tank, right? Like you have the podcast, what's the name of it?
The Architect Network.
Architect
Everything
network,
in the world of architecture and technology.
Tech, yeah. And you're doing this kind of theoretical models and projects of how you can explore, develop more efficiently the city, and you have great visuals, and I actually saw them published somewhere first, and I didn't know it was yours, like the Pixel project.
Right, right.
Yeah. So I think the passion, like this design drive you have, is definitely something that just doesn't fit into the simple like game.
Yeah, and that's where. Yeah, and honestly, when I was working as a facade consultant before I joined Big, so I was a specialist again. But you know, I had this computational background. I also had this BIM, and I've come from a design background, you know, doing competitions and things like that. And really, I just consider myself like a digitally fluent architect, right? I'm interested in design, and I used these digital tools in my own design process. But we're in an era where just not everyone in the field has that skill set. And in terms of like my day-to-day job, you become more valuable as a specialist right now than you do as a generalist, right? And I think so I decided to, when I was interviewing at different places, they didn't know really what to do with me. They were like, do you want to be on the project side? And, you know, you could be a project architect, and which, you know, some people like do that. I mean, yourself, you're a designer with that skill set as well. And or you go down the specialist route and you spend more time kind of overviewing the office. So yeah, to go back to like kind of what my role will be in London is really overviewing the office of the different tools that we use, BIM, computation, AR and VR mostly. And then, you know how I work in the office. You also have projects. So I have one foot in a project where I'm helping BIM or computational, you know, it could be as simple as helping someone out with a script that day. But then you have the other foot where, you know, I'm testing new tools and new technologies that we think could be implemented in the office. So, I mean, it's a great role because you get to work on a lot of projects. Like you don't get stuck on one project for ages. You know, you really get an overview of the office, which at Big is really, you know, it's fun. You see all the different projects going on, and you poke your head in, and then
and you have like two worlds, like a reality and this kind of theoretical world of the future, right? Because and you basically always at the edge, because Big is great in trying to implement the latest stuff, and somebody with the passion of yours is super helpful, because you can just provide them with this all the new things that just like hot from the oven, basically.
Yeah, I mean that's also a great point in that, like, I've always been a practicing architect, like building stuff, right? That's the goal of every architect. But you know, a lot of people that maybe have a digital skill set are more interested in the academic side and like very theoretical, like what's coming 5-10 years down the line. But I think what's interesting at, you know, a Big is the projects are moving so fast, and like this thing needs to work now or next week, otherwise we can't use it. So it really is a natural filter for, like, you know, when we test stuff, it's kind of like, does it work right now? Can we use it on a project tomorrow or, you know, next week? Or this is really good, but it's just not quite there yet. And maybe in 6 months, we'll come back and see if it's like they've developed it enough where we can use it. So I think it's a really nice natural filter to, you know, what can actually be used as a practicing architect. Because there's so much stuff out there that's, you know, very theoretical, especially coming out of university. Is, you know, you've got like generative design buildings made of drones, and, you know, like all these kind of more experimental stuff, which is great, but it's just, as a practicing architect, it's, you got to keep an eye on, but you can't necessarily use right now.
It's like forever stuck with me, the story you told about the kind of collaboration you had with design, like the facade engineers in I think it was in China, when we were building this casino in Macao.
Yeah. That was the Zaha Morpheus hotel. I was working up front.
So just for people who are listening, and I've been using this example several times already, last week I had a talk with this some students in Moscow, kind of like a little lecture, and the question was about using like parametrics, like using this the combination of Grasshopper and Revit and actual architecture, like how useful it could be. And I told this thing that I remember, and you maybe add some details, but it's so memorable to me because you had like 3 people team basically working on the glazing, right? On the it's like a skin of this super complicated I don't know how many like surfaces been like curving into each other, like thousand complicated joints. This building with 2 kind of punched openings, the Zaha is building in Macao, and you had this team of 3 kind of young people doing the script, and then to back you up with like a structure, right? There was a team of, I don't know, like 50 or like 70 people just doing everything conventional way and not using scripts.
So yeah, we were hired to do all of the freeform. So the building is Zaha's Morpheus Hotel in Macau, and it's basically twin towers wrapped in this exoskeleton, and then it has like 3 holes punched through it.
3 holes.
In a very organic Zaha Maya kind of way. And the freeform structure is clad in this aluminium cladding. And so those panels are all double curved or single curved at least. And so we were hired to basically just do the center of it, which is everything that's freeform. And we had to work out the panels. Yeah, and how the cladding attaches to the steel and all this kind of stuff. The glazing behind it is actually a little bit more simple because it's faceted into triangles. So it's kind of like, a little bit more rationalized geometry. And so the story that you're telling was basically we were doing the panels. And of course, the thing is with parametrics and parametricism, which Zaha and Nat coined the term, like we as architects have these tools to create these like crazy looking buildings and this extreme complex geometry, but we also have to use parametric tools to get them built. That's the only way you can really get them built, unless you just have a lot of man hours. So in our example, we were doing that using the power of Rhino and Grasshopper, and we were creating scripts to take a typical detail and basically instantiate it on all of this cladding. And like every single panel is unique. I think there was 25,000 panels. And then on each panel, there's, railings. We're doing everything from like the fasteners, like every little nut and bolt, over like 4 million fasteners, which is just literally different pieces of bent metal that attach from the railings to the cladding. And so we did that with like 3 people scripting on a day-to-day basis, 2 other guys managing and drawing the details and that kind of stuff. And we produced all the drawings between the 5 or 6 of us, depending on how it was. And
as a part of the script as well, right? Like
the script, everything basically. The steel and Zaha surface was inputted on one end of the script, and then on the output we had the model itself, and then fabrication drawings, which are all automated through Rhino and Grasshopper. Of course, it's not one. Everyone thinks it's like one giant script. It's like, it's a sequence of hundreds of scripts. You run one, and then you run the next, and
it's not like it's not magic, but it's like a very pragmatic thing.
It's a network of scripts. Right, you run script 1 and then script 2, and basically we were doing that we were harnessing the power of computation to do that. But the glazing underneath was done more traditionally with a local kind of contractor, and they had like a warehouse of 1 or 2 guys would take each mega panel, and then they would distribute the latest detail, and then everyone would have to start again, model it and draw it, or whatever they were, however they were doing.
So you can imagine a nightmare, like if any changes in massing comes.
yeah, yeah. Luckily, there was no changes. The changes would be more in the detail itself. Like, by that point, the massing was not going to change. Or, yeah, it would have been too late for them to change it because they were building it whilst we're doing this stuff.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, the massing, but the details change. You find out, this little fastener is not quite working. We can't source this type of metal or aluminium, so we've got to tweak the detail a little bit. So those were the kinds of changes, and I'm sure it's the same for them, right? They can't find this piece of this profile metal, or it's too expensive, so you have to make it a bit more lightweight.
Just like the amount of brain production hours that were on your side liberated by working on the script and not on the model, and not on each fragment individually, is incredible. And it's basically just illustrates where the future is. And the more things you can explain in code like this, probably the easier. I guess whenever you do something completely small scale and unique, that's where you can allow yourself to just hand draw and then draw in a computer just manually everything. But things like that, it's definitely the future.
I think it's definitely for me it was a sense of the future of practice as well. So then on my podcast that we just had a professor called Randy Deutsch, and he has a book called Super Users, and super users are people like myself with the skill sets. He comes up with, I think it's the 10 C's that he defines as a super user. And I think yourself, you're a super user as well. People that it's not only can design, they have that digital skill set of the mix of BIM and computation things, but it's also about being the soft skills of being an approachable person, someone you can have a conversation with, because that's also a big part of it. And he calls them super users. I name them architects, right? You're a digitally fluent architect. And I think what we'll see is architecture practices will get much smaller, but they'll just be full of super users. So rather than a team of 20 people that a few people know tools like Grasshopper and BIM and stuff like that, there's still a lot of inefficient stuff that we do as architects. If you have a small team of highly digitally fluent architects, you can achieve the same amount with less. So I think that, to me, that seems like the way we're going. And then when you also think about the fact that as architects we're overworked and underpaid, when you can condense down the team,
that's why basically
still create the same amount of projects and stuff. That's where I can see, and I think it could be a good thing for the industry as well, because then rather than 5 or 6 200-person firms in your city or whatever, you'll get a ton of 20 to 30 people firms, or 10, or that can challenge these big firms for work. So we might see a more
that's also true. And just to shed all this monkey work that's kind of debilitating, and I think for young designers, something that physically and maybe it's just unnecessary to go through all this man hours of repetitive work that's could be automated, and you can start thinking about the essence of design and not just the reproduction. And if you the way the office model shop is looking now, and the way it looked 5 years ago, 5 years ago it was just this 20 sweating juniors or interns just sitting there over the weekend putting together this foam models. And now it's exactly the same massing, much more pristine and crisp, and then it's just being built by this boxes of 3D printers. And it's
that's a great example. And also the cost of that, I know the office worked out the cost. You're talking about a few dollars to print one of those little things. Even an intern who's getting paid you know, it actually works out quite expensive for that little foam model. Like,
Yeah,
to
especially for
make,
overwork, and yeah, because
yeah,
in
yeah,
US you cannot overwork interns anymore.
yeah, they're getting paid overtime as well. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it works out, and that's a great example. Like, you know, I've helped people in the office. Like, I think there was one case, a young intern kind of came up and was like copying around like 1,000 trees on this huge
Yeah,
building. She was like, "Could we use Grasshopper?" In
yeah.
5 minutes, we were able to like populate a
Yeah,
couple thousand trees. And she was like, "Oh, I don't have to come in tomorrow." Like,
yeah,
it's small things, like those are small examples. And of course, it's not all you know, a dream scenario. There are those times where like it's just too, you know, the project's just too crazy. I just need to manually model this thing or whatever. But yeah, I think there's a big element of literally just streamlining the design process, and that's a lot of what I try and do in the office, is just help. You know, if we go from Rhino to Revit, let's not model it twice. Let's use Rhino inside to just bring it across.
hmm
You know, and so the designers spend more time designing, which is what they're good at, you know, like critical thinking. And that's where we do our magic, right? We don't do our magic redrawing the building 3 times from Rhino to Revit and then, you know, some other platform.
hmm
So yeah, I think people get like a little bit scared with all these digital tools and you know, automating design stuff, but it's more about automating the stuff we don't need to do. Like,
hmm
it's, you know, I don't need to draw a wall with 4 lines now. I can just draw it with 1 line in Revit, and you know, these things are kind of automated a bit more.
And you know, like I just thought that it's almost like pushing the frontier of this like of efficiency and just executing the like challenging design ideas, always pushing the frontier in a way that if you have a code or like a like chain of these different codes that you can use from one project to another, it's almost like never ever again anybody will have to do this like repetitive task anymore. I know that it's difficult because people have like their own approach to kind
Yeah,
of deal with geometry. There are like 15 different ways you can do one
yeah,
thing, right? Or
yeah,
maybe even more. But all in all, I think in the end, some of the commands, some of like the requests that you have for your geometry could be boiled down to almost like another bar, you know, like now you populate something, but like maybe at some point it could be like just populate the entire building with like this kind of, I don't know, like this kind of window opening, like this kind of profile, like this kind of glass, and it's all kind of become parameterized more and more, you know. And I remember Jan when I think he was working on the Twin Towers. This, remember, like 11th,
right.
I think it's called, like this
Yeah.
two twisting towers at the
Oh
waterfront,
yeah, yeah.
Hudson. So it was like when I just joined 2015, the day when he finished the code. He'd been working for like, it was like quite a big amount of time. He sent this the entire office message about the codes that now all the elements of the windows could be just they are parameterized, and now you can like
Yeah,
just
yeah.
lay them out automatically. It was such a cheer. It was such a appreciation from everybody who worked, like even on other projects. It was celebrated as if like a building was built, you know, by itself, but it was like a tool created,
It's
and that
a,
was yeah.
yeah, a digital twin, a digital equivalent of building something. But yeah, I think it is like you know, it's a super important thing. But I also, for me, I'm also more interested in like teaching architects how to do it themselves rather
Mm-hmm.
than just giving them a tool to do
Mm-hmm.
it. Of course, there's always a balance, right? The tree example, like that's a script that you can put into a library. But for me, I think it's way more powerful to teach you to do
Yeah,
these things yourself,
it's more
because then,
creative as well.
yeah, because you're putting your creative mind into the script itself. It's just another medium for you to express your creativity or something. I think people think that when you create a script, it's like this magic button that you press and then the building just appears. But it's
Yeah.
not, it's really, it can be really, really personal. Like, me and you could create two different scripts that does the same thing, but the way that we'll get there will be very different. And, you'll take a slightly different spin on it, whereas I'll take a different spin on it. And so, yeah, that's why I think it's important for architects to learn more of these digital tools. And that's where the Architect Network came about, where we're starting to just have podcasts and talks about it, but we're soon creating tutorials and YouTube videos on how to use these things, because I felt like it was just lacking a little bit in the industry. And as architects, we're slow to adopt technology, which is
yeah. This is incredible what you. Yeah, that's incredible thing you guys doing, because basically if you have this on the YouTube and tutorial, it's just like it's such an independent thing from that moment, because people somewhere like in Siberia, like they don't have like any other remote geographic point, they don't have a university, maybe they don't have money to apply even online, and then they have this thing and they can actually have a skill and then like work, maybe not even having some like impressive like a name of university in the diploma, but that's probably the future where some things becoming slowly things becoming obsolete, and people basically teach each other things that before were kind of elite knowledge.
Exactly. That's literally I was getting invited to come teach at universities whilst I was in New York, which is trickier just because you got to get the visa to work for them and all that kind of stuff. But I thought you could go work for Columbia or NYU or all these different architecture schools in New York, and I thought it's still a lot of effort to put in the time to come off the course and everything. And that's when I started to teach online, and I thought, why teach if I teach at let's say Columbia or a local university, I'll teach 50, 100, 200 students, I don't know, maybe. And whereas I just record that exact same course online, modify it so it's more online based, and thousands of people could potentially view it. And I thought that was really powerful. And especially like now I get a lot of people reaching out from like India has a huge architecture culture, and like there's a ton of young architects, and it's like a country of almost a billion people. You could argue that they're the people that we need to train up the most, because those young architects are going to dictate the future of the environment, with all these people coming into the middle class. And so there's a huge community in South America and Africa as well. So it's really interesting when you do these online courses and people reach out afterwards, and you're like, some guy in some random place that did it and really enjoyed it, and you're like, wow, there's people there learning your stuff. So that's it just seemed like the future. And I've taught for a few other platforms like Think Parametric and Live Academy and some other ones. And then I thought, well, a lot of the stuff that was online was also very experimental, like blob architecture or very Instagrammy stuff. So I also thought there was like missing a perspective from practice, like actually working in practice. And so that's where Architect Network was born. And we started off in Clubhouse just doing talks like we are. I'm just working on the YouTube channel now, and we'll have courses in the near future as well. So, and to teach stuff like Grasshopper, Rhino, and all that stuff, but also have conversations about blockchain. What the hell is blockchain? Why do we care as architects and stuff like that? So it's kind of a mix between the technologies that we use as architects to design stuff, but also the technology that influences our industry, and how is it going to influence the industry?
And so basically you just touched so many points, but like the first one is that it's like delegating this teaching and self ability to self-teach to the network. It's just like this like network university that we all present like without being a part of like one group, or like without going like to this building to like get this knowledge. It's just like kind of swarming here online, like you can stay in your apartment and get this knowledge if you're dedicated. That's
and I guess COVID like amplified that, really, didn't it?
With COVID, I think I was just like reading something preparing to our talk, and I thought that it feels like a new era. Like for some reason, just maybe like it shook up us so much that it's almost created this like new step to kind of start like referring in your mind to when you can think about the future, like, okay, so like this is already like the new kind of base we're starting from, and everything feels somewhat like fresher and more open than like 2 years ago. And in these terms, I wanted to ask you, I think that lots of people have this question in mind, and like me including, is what for in your opinion the next kind of frontier, something that we don't see, like people who even work in architecture but are not like savvy in coding and in parameterization. From your standpoint, what's the next cool thing to come?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot, and it's really hard because there's so many. Yeah, I think we're just I really think we're in an interesting time to be an architect, because on the horizon, there's so many interesting technologies that can completely disrupt our industry. And our industry, and not just architecture, let's say the AEC industry, architecture, engineering, and construction, is so, especially construction, is so dated, right? It's like, I keep using this statistic, and I hope it's right because I did read it somewhere, but like the construction industry is one of the only industries to decline in efficiency in the last 10 or so years. So we're building slower now than we were 10 years ago. Like, how is that even possible with like everything that's coming? And so, I mean, there's, 3D printing, for example, like that was something I thought 3 or 4 years ago. I was like, it's cool, really excited about it. Do I see us printing buildings? And, we saw like everyone was like making these crazy visuals of 3D printed skyscrapers and stuff like that. And I was like, I can't see us printing homes for a little while. But then companies like Icon and Branch Technology, they're like, wow, we're actually 3D printing homes now. We can print them in some climates and things like that. So, that's really exciting. The whole mass timber modular construction movement is getting really interesting. And we're almost getting to that diagram of like the architect and the computer, and then the wire going over to the machine that makes the building, like whether it's 3D printed or it's like CNC'd out of timber or something sustainable. So like ultimately I'm excited about architects going back to being master builders through technology. But then, you've also got things like the video game industry is really coming into the AEC industry and changing the way that we design and communicate our ideas. Right now as architects, we design in Rhino, Grasshopper, Revit, and like we have like a million programs that we that we need to learn. I think the game industry will change that and like, condense it down so we design, document, and can use things like Grasshopper in one platform that's probably going to be based on game engines. And we can also interact with clients, and users can modify things in game industry. And then you can then continue the conversation to like AI and machine learning, and like how will that affect our industry, and will that be a good thing or a bad thing? Like there's so many interesting technologies. I even think like the business model of architecture, I think, needs to change. Like you know, this idea that we just have clients and we get paid for our time, you know, like I said, there's many architects are overworked, underpaid right now. And I feel like we're at a period where, you know, the business model of architecture needs to change. I think we could maybe get a bit more entrepreneurial. I think you see that in the office a little bit at Big, you know, where we invested a little bit into this construction company in Denmark. We invested in Icon 3D printing, and you know, we just released Neighbor, this new startup thing. So I also wonder if maybe architects will become a bit more entrepreneurial. Like, you think about what we do, we put these amazing presentations together, these concepts. Like, if you added the business plan at the end of that document, you've got a startup idea. So
Yeah.
rather than getting paid to do these ideas for other people, will we see architects being a bit more entrepreneurial, and will be like a think tank for, you know, like Archi Ventures or something like that? So I know I've gone like all over the place. There's not really one answer to
No, it's super cool.
But I just think it's like with everything going on, it's the industry's like ready for change. And I almost think COVID is amplifying it, right? Everyone's changing jobs and like rethinking their lives. And
yeah, the priorities, everything, like efficiency, what's actually was efficient and what was not, like what was merely symbolic in like our previous working culture, and like we can just kind of be rid of it. I just talked to a young architect from Moscow who's kind of having maybe 8-year-old practice and doing like very interesting things. So like built maybe like 4 or 5 already buildings in the city. He said that now like the conversation with clients is just like everything moved to Instagram. Basically they just sending each other like snapshots. Like there is no like running to the office with like huge scale drawings, or making sure that like everything looks so perfect, like you have this model, everything, just the environment is smelling good and everything. It's just everything's so quick, and people the clients are younger, and the clients, they don't need this dance around them to understand the project anymore, and they also becoming just more familiar with technologies and with what's cool and what's cool in architecture, what people want to buy, and they can read it now just from the iPhone, and it's crazy. I mean, I understand how like in the more like snobbish world, in the world more kind of conservative thinking world in terms of culture, you can say that like through this process lots of details, lots of kind of nuances can be lost, but maybe it's like on us to preserve and like bring to this new world like some of these old school things that bring the quality, but maybe it's just great chance to bump up the efficiency. And we talked about, we didn't talk but we just brushed upon it just a little bit before. When you said like in architectural school for you, it was a question like, why we're designing this, like why wouldn't you put this balcony, like, or why wouldn't you do something that obviously pleasant to people? My question is how this computational architecture could be more appealing to people, because I think right now it's something that's this holy grail for really like progressive and adventurous architects, but for people who use the city, it's still like this terra incognita. And I wonder, is there any like stylistic filter for computational architecture? Should it always be kind of this grand child of like modernism and always kind of slick and like glass and concrete, or at some point they would be a freedom to just branch out again into any style you basically want?
Yeah, no, I think the tools came with like the term parametricism. Like it became a style, right? That you could see a building, you'd be like, that was made using Grasshopper or whatever, because it had like some, you know, gradient facade pattern or whatever. So I think we were in the era of parametricism, of like, this thing is a style. It's given us the ability to create crazy buildings or like these computational patterns, etc., etc. But I think we're now entering the second phase, which actually is included in Patrick Schumacher's parametricism 2.0. Is kind of, now we've had our fun with style, we need to use it to actually, achieve things. So for me, I think to the average person, I don't think, using computation and stuff, they are tools that just allow us to bring these things to reality. Like for me, it's about utilizing all these technologies to create these kind of positive, architecture and
environments.
Environments. Yeah, it's not really that we have to like. It's so much a style thing. Of course, there are going to be architects and things like sure, like the Pixel Facade project that I did.
I was thinking right now,
and a lot of like the projects that I do with Pixel. You might look at them and think they're not really computationally driven, but like all of them are very computationally driven. But we just use it as a way to kind of streamline our design process. Sometimes it's just me and one other person working on the project, so we use those tools to get the project done. So yeah,
can you describe the Pixel in just in 2 words? So Pixel, it's basically this unit, right? That could be multiplied, but like the configuration of it could be different. The one I saw, this what was it, Daily or the Zine? Like they had this rendering, like when you're standing on this terrace on this balcony, and you have the panel with some kind of vines growing in it, being in different modes. Like you can open, you can close, and the perception of the facade from the inside and from the outside is different. And you have all these different configurations where it could be just literally kind of, like the offset of the actual skin of the building, so it just becomes like a little bit fatter and kind of breathing a little bit more. Or you can like start to turn the modules, and they start to look nothing like the skin of the building, and they get all these new ways to be configured.
Yeah. So Pixel Facade was the project that kicked off the my little think tank Pixel, which the project was really like, we wanted to rethink a couple things. One, how do we actually build, right? And so that's when we started to look at like 3D printing versus concrete construction. And the front runner was mass timber. It's like it's an old technology that's coming back that completely could revolutionize the way that we build. Now mass timber, like everyone's on the mass timber bandwagon right now. But so we found if we use timber combined with modular building elements, we now have a building system that we could construct much faster than concrete and steel and that kind of stuff. Secondly, it's also way more sustainable. So we now have a way to build a Lego set, essentially, right? That's every architect's dream, is to create their own like little Lego set. And then we thought, well, once you have a building system, how do you approach rethinking how you approach a project as an architect, right? So then the way that we typically approach a project is that we have a site, we make a bespoke solution to a bespoke problem, we create this amazing idea, and then we throw it away. We can never redo that idea again, and we start from scratch again. And so the second part of the idea was to use the building system to create a adaptable and scalable building system. So like the system can be configured in different ways. Like you said, it could be just a rectangular floor plate. It could be like a zigzag, and you could still create a contextual response to the site, but using this Lego set. And so that's kind of the two ideas that we were playing with. And then the building system itself is very much based on biophilia, so like amplifying nature, giving people outdoor space if they're in an office environment, giving you outdoor space, and being able to get outside. If it's residential, again, everyone has a balcony space. But then the kind of third element was, what if the users themselves could actually configure the building to a degree? So like, because it's a modular system, it's your little guy. because it's a modular system, the users can actually have their say in, like, if it's an office floor plate, we were envisioning like each office would configure it slightly different for their particular business. If it's a apartment building, they can, you can configure the apartment to suit your family and your family's needs. So essentially the Pixel Facade, it started off as just a facade. It was a competition for a facade, but then it quickly grew into like this holistic building system.
Is this structure still like a steel core, and then it's kind of cased in timber, or it's all timber too as well?
For that first project, yeah, we did actually do the competition was for what was it called? Metal Construction magazine. So we didn't want to do it totally timber. So, and also we proposed quite a high tower. So we were like, let's be a bit more, realistic, and we'll put some steel elements combined with timber. So it was like a hybrid structure. But then quickly we went to like a full timber building system, outside of the metals for construction competitions.
Yeah, I think it's like, I'm sorry. I think it's almost like the Zogsby, please come back. So I'm so sorry. So it feels like the thing that you guys designed, and like the technology that you need in order to execute it is kind of almost like not there yet, right? Like this pixelated, and the next project you have this modular stuff, like the way it still needs to be connected vertically is something that I think the construction world is having some like troubles now. And like the latest stuff I heard about the modular projects, like this modular units being just connected together, they always was talking about how difficult it is to make sure it's like nothing leaks, like because they are modular, but they're also like still dependent on each other. And the project you have, like, what's the name of it? Like not the pixel one, but the kind of this elongated modules.
Oh, is it Home of 2030 with the houses?
Yeah, where you can like just stack you stack them in your visuals, kind of a little bit like offset, and they have this kind of vegetation on the walls.
Oh yeah, that was kind of Pixel Facade 2.0.
2.0.
Yeah,
that one had some kind of almost independent cycle inside of it, right? So you don't have to even connect them to each other.
Yeah. We've been experimenting with loads of different ways to do this kind of, to crack the modular code, so to speak, that people keep trying to do. I think in reality, it will take time to become adopted fully. I almost think you need to come at it from a complete, like a startup that does this from the ground up, which is kind of what Katera tried to do. But they've just gone bust. So, and all these other tech companies trying to do it. But yeah, I think you almost need to start from scratch or build up, like how it's manufactured, how it's assembled, how it's designed. And, when you have this thing under one roof, I think, the process from manufacturing to design to assembly can be much more streamlined. So yeah, I think eventually that will be the future of, we'll see more housing startups that have, each one has their own building system, and they've kind of nailed it. I mean, we're already starting to see it, but it's interesting on that topic. You see either technology people like the Googles and the WeWorks and the Amazons coming into that space and trying to crack it. And what happens is I think they approach it like a technology company, where technology, you just do it as quick as you can, and then we'll fix it once it's sent out. Whereas like a building, you can't fix it once it's out. It's like, it's done. And then you see architects trying to do it and we either over design the thing or we spend all the time designing it and never get to the business model and the construction side of it. So it feels like you almost need that the entrepreneur side and the architect side to really
push it.
Yeah.
Something that I was thinking about already after I sent you this kind of examples of questions, kind of like some kind of framework for conversation. So that's maybe
we can go off piece.
If you were preparing, that would be like not something I mentioned before. But I was thinking, how more and more like digitally free we become. Would it kind of bring some kind of like reaction in the real world where we actually would like to be more grounded in reality? Because it feels like late modernist project, like if we say like that, even like Bjarke Ingels is kind of some kind of in my mind, I think as like a grandchild of classical modernism. If they tried to break into this like world of future actually materially and like bring this conceptual liberation to people through the look of the building, would there be some kind of like not it's either pushback or maybe just a reaction from people after they already live so many hours of their day digitally to actually be more material, like have more exposure to actual textures, to natural surfaces, to maybe even like the geometries that are not telling you how futuristic everything could be, but make you feel like home here. So in digital world, you can be more courageous. So kind of to balance it out.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like the process, like that project, the process is very digital and we're utilizing different technologies to make it become a reality. But the final product, for me, I'm always trying to achieve something that's a bit more human, like connecting back to nature. Like the timber is a great example, right? I can stream off all these technical reasons why to use timber. It can be made into a modular building system. It's super light, it's super strong, sustainable. But for the user, they are now able to live, and you can leave the structure completely open. So you're now living in a timber rich environment, in a very nature rich environment. And for me, that gives the end user, the people that live in the home or the apartment, this added benefit. So it's again, like I think Chris Precht, I never know if I say his name correctly. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but I think he's a kind of window into maybe the future of that. He's a very digitally fluent architect. He's become very famous on Instagram with his company. It was called Pender. Now it's called Precht Studio.
Yeah, heard about it.
I think his work is a great example where from what I understand, they're very digitally driven and they use things like Grasshopper and, all these kind of tools. But when you look at his work, it's very contextual. It's very, human centric. It's very nature driven. And he's also, his practice model is also really forward thinking. He just has a small practice of, I think, maybe less than 10 people, 20 people, or something like that, in the middle of the mountains in the Alps, just living, a completely different life. And I think to me, that seems to be the next generation. And he seems like he is the next star architect at the moment. He's the new young guy that's become super famous on Instagram for his work. And to me, that's a great example of like this new digital a digital architect. It's not a style. I think it's just utilizing technology to create more human-centric architecture. Whereas before it was more like, let's take the more extreme examples of the Frank Gehry's and the Zahas, where it's very much about form and expression and you know, the human-centric side comes secondary to
like
that, maybe.
or
Yeah.
so.
So for me, it's more like, how can we utilize technology to create more human-centric architecture, and not so much like it's a digital futuristic like Tron style of
Yeah,
you know, we're all living in these hyper modern white like bubbles or whatever.
yeah. So this part, like a throne part, and this kind of futuristic thinking becomes something peculiarly outdated. You know how when now you look at the postcards that people used like in 1905, and there was like a funny kind of illustrations of how future is going to be. People would be like skating, I don't know, like talking through
Like
like some kind
flying
of
cars.
flying cars, like having like the tubes connecting their helmets and like talking like this, a kind of like naive vision of what people actually thought could be the future. So like we are seeing how like the most daring things of like previous decades slowly becoming that, and that's interesting because like it's everything becoming softer, everything becoming having less and less edges. I'm not talking about like geometry. I'm talking about just
Yeah.
like the ease of communication and things like that. About like England and London, like I wonder how it's going to unfold there in like concerning this topic. Like, do people slowly form this new kind of request to architects in London, like because it's probably one of my favorite cities, and I feel like very connected to UK in general, just through my like educational experience and just the way I was brought up, I guess. The architecture, like the latest greatest kind of icons that we have in London, they are very like like how to say, like they're symbolic about the modern age, and they're like very strong, like the shape is commanding, and I think they're already also something that you would describe as like before COVID, and then like what's going to be post COVID London. Like, do you see any
Yeah.
changes right now?
I mean, I've literally been back a couple of days, so I'm still
Yeah,
finding my
yeah,
own
I
way.
know.
But I think honestly, one of the other reasons, like there was a number of reasons why I decided to come to the London office and leave New York. But one of them was I felt like the London architecture scene was like a little bit dead. Like,
Mhm.
you know,
Stagnating.
yeah, it's a little bit stagnant. And like, you know, what Foster's was the like the poster child for British architecture with Rogers and stuff like that. And then you got the next generation of the
Mummified already,
Heatherwicks,
those guys.
Heatherwick, David Ajay, you know, some other like, you know, famous architects like that. But there's a saying in the UK that drives me nuts. Like whenever I work with British architects, like I'm a British architect, but I've been abroad for quite a long time now. So
Yeah,
in countries where it's much more, you know, open to new ideas and stuff like that. Whereas here, there's a saying that drives me nuts. Is like that'll never get planning. So like so many
yeah.
ideas get killed before they even are put forward. And you know, I have a bunch of friends that are also starting their own practices at the moment, and everyone seems to have the same projects on their website. Like there's a, you know, a townhouse that they've done in London, which is their own project, an extension or a house in the countryside. I feel no one's really pushing the boundaries of British architecture. And I think there's also like in some of my recent work with Pixel, I think because I've lived outside of the UK for so long, and you come back, you realize what makes, you know, the UK uniquely British or uniquely UK, right? And you start to remember those things from when you're a kid, and so I've been kind of going through my last three projects have been very much like reviving old British ideas and typologies
Mm.
of whether it's homes, or we did a rail competition recently, and you know, using modern methods of construction and technology to bring back like familiar yet modern reinterpretations
Yeah,
of like British
yeah,
architecture. And I
yeah.
think that got kind of, it's been kind of lost in some, when you stay here all the time, you just take that stuff for granted. So there's something quite interesting about coming back. And already I feel like a bit of a foreigner in my own country, because it's been almost 10 years since I've
It's
lived
by
here.
contrast, yeah.
Yeah, so
but
you kind of like you're rediscovering your own country a little bit, which is kind of interesting.
yeah, I think UK was always this amazing example of how people always wanted to be technologically up to date, but always wanted to domesticate the environment, to make things feel like home.
Yeah, I
And
think. No, go on.
Yeah, just in terms of architecture, that's interesting because people would have very strong, I think, internal vector in terms of like, does it feel right, or does it not? Like I think people would even be open to modern things. It's just like we need to discover this language that would be pleasing to people, that would be that would be good for our aesthetic understanding, and just like to highlighting our place in the history, like on the trajectory, but at the same time allow people to feel that they are not living in something that could be just copy pasted from like everywhere, copy pasted to any other environment, basically, or all over the world. They want something that's kind of authentically I don't know how to say, like British, like authentically, like from this place, from this locale.
Yeah, I think that modern yet familiar approach could work quite well. But I also think, like, people are just, once they see a good idea, they appreciate it. I think the British general public to architecture is quite pessimistic. We like to nickname, like, every building that goes up into London gets nicknames like some silly name, like the gherkin, the cheese grater, the walkie-talkie.
Yeah. Walkie-talkie is, oh my god. Hey, Ollie, disappears for a second. Can you hear me? Oh, hey.
I think my internet kicked out for a second.
Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that.
That's the last thing I heard was walkie-talkie, and that's just like
choppy.
Yeah, the walkie-talkie was the last thing I heard, and it's just like I had all this reaction because like I saw this project is just, I think a little bit ridiculous, and just like so like there were good proportions. So I feel that people come up with nicknames because they basically sometimes give buildings what they deserve. So I am not that skeptical about common people, like not common, like what's the word, like layman's approach to architecture. I think it's kind of sometimes on us to make the buildings to deserve a better nickname, like when they actually sympathetic to people, and not like just something that people are afraid of. But yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, but I think the general public are open to interesting new ideas. If it works, then people will gravitate to it. But yeah, I think it's an interest. Again, it's also an interesting time. The UK architecture scene is a little bit stagnated right now, and needs some new input, I think.
Okay, here we go.
There we go.
Yeah, hopefully it's gonna be you and people like you, and I'm excited for British architectural scene, and I kind of seeing things like this. I'm kind of curious how it would feel to go back to a place like Moscow for me, because just the development that they had is crazy, and they this year they implementing the driverless cars. They already have like touchless like the ticketing systems everywhere, and the approach to architecture from developers is different right now. It's less totalitarian. It's more kind of quick, and just already with all the latest modern projects in mind. So yeah, it's all definitely will need some new specialist who would kind of be the perfect fit for the space and for ability to just adapt the design quickly.
How long have you been out of Russia for?
That's been almost 2 years since the last time I went. But every time I go, it's very short visits. It's like also snippets of like 5-7 days.
But how long since you were living in how long have you been living in the US or whatever?
Yeah, it's gonna be, it's 6.5 years already.
Yeah, so it's a good time. I think what's interesting, I don't know how it was for you and Moscow and Russia, but like moving to the US and like versus the UK, it's weird because the US, a lot of technologies are created, you know, they have the home of technology of Silicon Valley, right? But it's not implemented in society for a little while. Whereas the UK, I guess because we're a much smaller country, but you know, we have a big population, technologies are adopted a lot quicker. And this could be like really dumb things. Like I think last year the metro just got the touch, you know, cards. Like that's been in London for like, I swear,
it's like
15, yeah, I feel like 15 years or something. And like the banking system, when I moved to America, I was like, I had to remember how to write a physical check. I was like, I haven't written a check since I was like my first bank account. I think I had a checkbook. And it's weird, yeah, just like some technologies in the US is really behind. So it's kind of interesting. One thing I found here is like blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies and stuff like that are getting adopted quite quickly here, and people are really excited about them for different industries. And so it'll be interesting to see what other kind of technologies and stuff get adopted and like how it will affect architecture and stuff like that. So I feel like as an architect coming back to the UK, we are more open to, you know, innovation. But then it's the combination of, you know, architecture and style and aesthetic as well.
Yeah, it's kind of psychologically easier to pick and choose from what other people have on their table. And because when people have it themselves, they're like, okay, like, should I use this or that? But if you see somebody else, you kind of, okay, this thing worked and this thing, like if you just kind of analyze it with like a little bit like a colder mind. And I think in Asia, things also like developing super quick in the same logic. People are more brave to use some things that even like maybe coming from US are not being used in US at the same time. Olly, I think the last thing I'd like to just touch upon is more kind of focused on you and like what's the hottest like interest you have right now, like what are the projects you excited to like start working, and where you see yourself, like if there's anything that you can share.
There's always again, this is a difficult one, there's always stuff going on, but I mean, personally I'm really interested in obviously we started this architect network thing. That's something I'm definitely going to be pushing over the next like 6 months to get that off the ground. I'm really interested in kind of helping to teach, you know, the next generation, the current generation of architects, like these digital tools and technologies. So that's definitely something I'm going to be working on the next few months for sure. Otherwise, there's too many things. That's my problem. There's too many things going on that are interesting. I'm definitely like, for my own personal skill set, and like if there's architects out there thinking of upskilling in some way, I'm spending a lot more time learning like the Unreal game engine, for example. I really think that's going to be a big part of the skill set of future architects. Maybe not be in the game industry, game engine itself, but like the next Rhino or Revit, I think will be Unreal based. So I'm getting my claws into the game engine world, and it's been it's amazing to see what the Unreal Engine can do. And I would definitely, like any architects listening, look into Unreal and how they're like all these different companies are using Unreal for different architecture stuff. There's some crazy stuff going on right now. But yeah, otherwise, I think, as always, like keeping an eye out on what technologies are coming around the corner. Blockchain is one I'm really interested in. Like, will we see a cryptocurrency come around that's based on real estate, and will blockchain be a technology that like democratizes architecture a little bit? So like what I mean by that is, let's say this podcast, right? Let's go back maybe 10, maybe more than that, 15 years ago. If we wanted to host like a TV show online or like out there, we would, or you were a musician or you know a filmmaker, you would have to go to a media company and go through that. But now you have YouTube and you can just put these things out, right? Music as well. You had to know a music producer and go for a music producer to get your music out there. But now you can just put your music on Spotify. I wonder if like blockchain technology, for example, would allow architects to create a platform where you can potentially raise money for projects, you could fund your own projects and become that full architect developer and democratize architecture a little bit. So rather than the way that we work now, where it's like banks and very rich people create our building, fund the buildings, and it's driven very much by profit, could it be more driven by the people for the people rather than by the rich for the rich kind of thing?
Yeah, and it's like tons of paperwork, and all the legalities that I think just makes it more difficult for people even like to think to move into more democratized process of just creating architecture.
Would you like to invest in Zaha's next project or Big's next project? All right, we couldn't do that, right? Unless we were at least multimillionaires. But what if there was a platform where you could invest your money in an early stage of a project and then see that project go through, and it was a project that also added to the city like affordable housing or housing for the middle class, let alone affordable housing and things like that. So that's one thing I'm really interested in. I'm seeing there's so much hype right now about NFTs and Bitcoin and all this kind of stuff. And we're in that crazy period of like, we don't know what this will
boil down to.
A lot of this will die, but out of the when the others die, the interesting ones will come up. And I wonder if there'll be something that will kind of revolutionize our industry, whether it's how we fund projects, how we develop projects, how we buy homes. There's something there that I think will be really interesting.
Yeah, it's like this Uberification of the systems that were kind of heavy and complicated, and like multi-linked before into super intuitive things that you can just like solve from your palm of your hand.
I mean, yeah, look at buying your own home just seems like a crazy, to buy your own home now at our age is like, it's a huge deposit. There's all this paperwork, all this cost. And I feel like that's something that could be kind of revolutionized by technology like blockchain.
And it's basically, it's adjacent. I mean, it's very close to our domain, basically. So probably it feels like, and based on what you say, it feels like the architecture is like the next one that has to go through this modernization. And not only like in a hard skilled world, but in this technological and organizational, I guess, domain.
I definitely think either architects and architecture practice needs to evolve soon. It feels like, doesn't it? It feels like there's a bit of a not a revolution, but like a rebirth of architecture and architecture practice coming soon. Who knows what that is?
yeah. So and then people like you would like could be this how do you say, like a harbinger of change, like this people who basically send the signal that it's coming and the potential is huge, and lots of people who want to wake up to this, like they could be really really successful in the future. And thank you for this message and for inspiration.
No, and thank you for having me. I think it's like I said, it's a super interesting time to be an architect. I haven't given up on being an architect and jumped over to the work for Google or whatever. But I think it's a really interesting time, and we'll see some really interesting kind of innovations in our field soon. We'll have to see it soon, otherwise we'll go out of a job, maybe.
Cool. Thanks so much, Olly. Thank you for your time. Yeah, and good luck kind of accommodating yourself in your home city, and all the best with your stuff at big and your individual endeavors. That's exciting to see you kind of progressing in like several directions at the same time. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, and I'm interested to see your podcast grow. I can tune in now because this will be the first one in English. I did see them, but I was like, my Russian is not so great. So.
Okay, one day it's going to be like automatically translated with like the same voice and intonation, just like also like a button. So cool. Okay. Thanks.
Awesome,
thanks again, Olly. Yeah. So have a great day. Have a great weekend, and hopefully to talk to you soon.
Cool. Speak soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye now.